Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on Facebook Live, YouTube, and on Twitter. As always, I'm Bryson Carver. It is great to have you in on this Friday evening. Do we have a loaded show for you guys today? First of all, do we have a loaded sports weekend in store? Not we, just the sports world in general has in store for us. The fans, the media, the players, everybody in between. It's so exciting. We got the World Cup, obviously. U.S. versus the Netherlands. I am not confident whatsoever. I don't know if that makes me unpatriotic. I certainly hope it doesn't come off that way. But Christian Pulisic is going to play, though, it looks like. So we should at least have a prayer's chance against the Netherlands tomorrow in the round of 16. But I'm going to start the show with Bills Patriots. Going to focus mostly on New England, but I do think that with Buffalo, there's something that I saw last night, and I tweeted about it, that is a very, very encouraging sign if you're a Buffalo Bills fan, if you're a member of Bills Mafia moving forward. I'll get to that, as well as championship weekend in college football. Folks, in less than 48 hours, we are going to know who the 4 teams in the college football playoff will be. So excited to talk about that. I'll predict some of the championship games that have playoff relevance. Okay, so ACC title game. Sorry, Clemson and North Carolina fans. Nobody's watching that game except for Clemson and North Carolina fans. Okay, because at that same time, people are going to be watching Purdue, Michigan. I'm talking about the games that have college football playoff relevance. I'll predict all of those later on the show. And of course, it's week 13, folks. And if the NFL, I love the people who put together the schedules do a masterful job every winter. Because to this point, week 13 is far and away the most interesting slate of games all season long for an entire Sunday. I mean, I mentioned the games yesterday, like your Chiefs, Bengals, your games like that. But even the games between teams with a losing record or non-contending teams are fascinating, okay? So looking forward to predicting those games later in the show. So again, we've got a loaded show for you today. Before I get any sports, though, I think it is worth mentioning, I do have a little prop adjustment here over my right shoulder. Got the man with the bag behind me. I got the basketball version of Santa. He's in the white Santa suit with the 25 on it, obviously for December 25th, Christmas Day. And I've got the football version of Santa. I'm sure he would have made for a heck of a running back back in his younger days. So listen, for all those watching or listening, just know, even on Carving It Up Live, he sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. And I made sure I made sure I had a conversation with him beforehand. He approves of my takes. Okay, so there's nothing. I'm not going to say anything that's going to get me on the naughty list, I think. So let's start with an NFL game last night. Again, the Week 13 schedule is incredible, and last night's game was, I think, a part of that in terms of interest level. We've had some duds in the Thursday night schedule. Last night was highly interesting in terms of the matchup. Buffalo Bills, New England Patriots. Bills won the game 24-10. And as I heard somebody on the radio say earlier today, that was the most lopsided 24-10 game I've ever seen in my life. Seriously. So for the New England Patriots, who now have fallen to 6-6, and I said coming into the season that they would not make the playoffs, but they would start the first half and first 10 games or so of this season and be really interesting, right? They'd be in the playoff mix. We'd be talking about, hey, can they supplant Buffalo or, in this case now this year, the Miami Dolphins for the division? No, they actually can't even beat the Jets, but that's another conversation for another day. But I said, early in their schedule, a lot of winnable games, okay? Because you got the Bears, which they actually lost that game, but you got the Browns and the Lions. Yeah, you'll win those games. The Pittsburgh Steelers, who are limited offensively, they'll win those games. But the last 6-7 games of the year for the Patriots, and I said this, go back and check the tape back when the schedule came out in May. Brutal. Minnesota, Buffalo twice, Cincinnati, that explosive Raiders offense, Kyler Murray, and Miami. And I said coming in this year, I'm not sure the Patriots win more than one of those games. Thus far, through this stretch of the season that I talked about coming into the season, they're 0-2. And it's for exactly the reasons that I thought they'd be 0-2 by this point in this little stretch of the season to close out the season, and for the very reason that I thought they missed the playoffs with a 7-10 record. 2 individuals. I'll start with the first one before I get into the second one. The first one, Bill Belichick, a man who's been called the greatest coach of all time for, I'd go so far as to say a decade, at least since him and Tom Brady won their 5th Super Bowl title against the Atlanta Falcons with that legendary 28-3 comeback. I'd say since then, maybe even before then, people have been talking about, oh, Belichick's the greatest coach ever. And I've always pushed back on that point. Because in terms of influence on the game, he doesn't hold the resume of a Bill Walsh, a Vince Lombardi. Heck, even Coach Brown in Cleveland, decades and decades and decades ago, does all the influence. He has never won without Tom Brady. Never. Those 4 seasons in Cleveland, got to the playoffs once. Without Tom Brady in New England, which is now, 5 years? He's gotten to the playoffs once. So Belichick's got a history of this. And coming into the season, and I was all over Bill for doing this. When Josh McDaniels left to go to the Las Vegas Raiders to be their new head coach. Okay, so there's a gap in the offensive coordinator spot. And with a young quarterback in Mac Jones, who you just took in the first round a year ago, that is a very important spot to fill, especially when Bill Belichick is not an offensive mind. He's a defensive coach. So you decide, hey, we're just going to wait the whole offseason, sit back in our rocking chairs, talk about the weather. Matt Patricia. That's what we're going to do. We're going to bring back Matt Patricia, and we're going to bring back Joe Judge. Two former coordinators for the New England Patriots that both bombed as head coaches, that both stunted the growth of their respective quarterbacks. We're going to bring those back for our second-year quarterback who we know is athletically limited. Mac Jones' strength, go back to the draft, and it's the one thing I said about him. You guys know I did not like Mac Jones coming out of the draft in 2021. But the one thing I said, and everybody said, even the doubters said, man, this kid is smart. Like, he's gotten by on processing defense as well, right? He's fairly accurate. He's got pretty good leadership intangibles. But in terms of talent, he doesn't even come close to Trevor Lawrence or to even Zach Wilson. Now, Zach Wilson, he was going to be a bust for another story. His was the intangibles that were the issue, okay? Not near as talented as Fields or even Trey Lance. So you are going to need great coaching like what Mac Jones had at Alabama on the offensive side of the ball specifically to develop him. And Belichick, who has been hearing for years about the genius he is, about how he can plug anybody because it's the Patriot way, can plug anybody in. We'll win games, we'll make the playoffs, and we got ourselves another opportunity to compete for a 7th Super Bowl title. No, that's not how it works. When you have the greatest quarterback of all time, heck, if you even have an elite quarterback, a Mahomes, an Allen, a Burrow, you can mask a lot of the flaws. Heck, look what Aaron Rodgers did for years with Nathaniel Hackett. How's Nathaniel Hackett look with a limited quarterback? Not great, but he looked pretty good when he had Aaron Rodgers. And now that Aaron has declined physically, Matt LaFleur's gotten exposed. Same thing with Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots ever since Tom Brady left them high and dry. Folks, since the greatest quarterback of all time left Bill Belichick, he is 1 game over 500. And I will bet, I'm not a betting man. It's the reason I have the segment if I were a betting man. But if I were, I'd lay a lot of money that by season's end, Coach Belichick in the 3 years post-Brady will have a losing record. Not hiring an actual offensive coordinator to develop your young guy. It'd be a stupid plan if you still had Tom Brady in his prime. But he's Tom Brady. Again, great arm, accurate, moves great in the pocket, great leadership. He's everything you could possibly want in a quarterback, minus being able to scramble like Lamar Jackson, in all honesty. He can mask those flaws. But when you have no real offensive coach, not to mention the pieces you put around him are garbage. Kobe Myers, Kendrick Bourne, and the one touchdown you got was via a special teams guy. The guy returned the punt for the game when he touchdown against the Jets a couple weeks ago. Hunter Henry. Remember Jonnu Smith? Remember a year and a half ago? Oh, Jonnu Smith, boy, he's going to be a big factor in this offense. I don't think I've heard his name called this year. Patriots offensive line hasn't been good. Ramondre Stevenson's a decent running back, but can't throw him the ball. He's not a great pass catcher out of the backfield. So number one, the blame list is unequivocally not Matt Patricia. It's Bill Belichick for putting Matt Patricia there. We knew Matt Patricia was going to be bad. We knew when the reports from Tom Curran and other Patriots insiders were coming out of training camp in August. Mac Jones pacing on the sidelines, frustrated. They could barely get a first down. Remember those joint practices they had against the Las Vegas Raiders, who, by the way, have a terrible defense? Patriots could barely get a first down against those guys. That's when I knew, yeah. Belichick's in over his head on this one. So number one on the list is Bill Belichick. Number two, a distant second, by the way, but number two is Mac Jones. You know, the two quarterbacks that I said coming out of a 2021 draft, because anytime you have a draft with 4 or 5 first-round talents, 4 or 5 guys that the Mel Kipers of the world, and back in the day, the Mike Mayocks of the world, and Tom McShay, all of them have, all the experts have them going in the first round. Anytime there's 4 or 5, let's just stick with 5. Usually 2 are amazing. 1 is fine. You know, nothing special, not really a franchise quarterback, but like a Teddy Bridgewater level guy, an Andy Dalton level guy. And 2 are busts. Well, thus far, we're not really certain. I think it's safe to say out of the 2021 class, 2 have separated themselves. And it's the 2 that I thought it would be for the most part. Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields. Trey Lance is a big fat mystery. He's barely played. And Zach Wilson, I think it's fairly established at this point, was a bust. Or is a bust. And Mac Jones, folks, is a bust. At what point are we going to recognize that this guy is not a franchise quarterback? You say, Bryson, you're contradicting yourself because you said Belichick didn't put an offensive coach around him and the receiving core isn't great. No, exact same receiving core last year that he looked okay with. Helped the Patriots get to the playoffs with. But those last 4 games down the stretch of the season, remember this? Remember the Patriots at one point were not only in line to win the AFC East. Forget that. They were in line with Michael McCorkle-Jones to get a first-round bye, to get the number 1 overall seed in the AFC over the Titans and the Chiefs and the Bills. The Patriots were going to do that. But then their quarterback's play dipped. He was awful against the Bills. He threw 3 passes. He was terrible against the Buffalo Bills in a massive game at home. He beat the Jaguars, but folks, Jaguars were the worst team in football last year. And then in a game against a Dolphins team that would have been better off losing to get a higher draft pick, he was badly outplayed by Tua Tagovailoa. And then the playoff game, obviously, against the Bills, he was dreadful. Patriots lost by 30 points. This year, listen, I've seen Tom Brady numerous occasions. And people act like, well, the Patriots, the receiving core is worse than it was in the Brady years. The last 3 to 4 years with Brady, it's darn near identical. If you want to say Julian Edelman, excuse me, at his peak is better than anybody New England has, I'll give you that. Although I would make a very strong argument that does Edelman amount to anything without Tom Brady? I mean, dude turned Chris Hogan into a legit number 1, number 2 receiver. Was Chris Hogan ever that in Buffalo or after New England? No. But we would go into Super Bowls and be like, boy, you got to worry about Chris Hogan now. That's what Tom Brady was doing. The Super Bowl against the Falcons, which they made that comeback. Tom Brady turned Malcolm Mitchell into a guy like, man, Atlanta needs to key in on Malcolm Mitchell. That's what Tom Brady was doing year after year after year. There was one season, he had a receiver named Gunnar Olszewski who he was throwing the ball to. At the end, he had an old Ben Watson. Not the young Ben Watson with the 07 Patriots. No, he had a few stops after that in New Orleans and Baltimore. Then he went back to New England, and he was washed. Tom Brady got that team at age 42 years old. to a division title. Mac Jones has the team at 6-6, and once again, you could hear Patriots fans kind of murmuring, we think we should go back to Bailey Zappi? I challenge anybody. Vikings game aside, because Mac Jones played well in that game, but folks, that's the first or second worst pass defense in the NFL in the Minnesota Vikings. It's going to get them beat in the playoffs. They made Mac Jones look like Tom Brady. Vikings game aside, name one of Mac Jones' starts that have looked better than any of Bailey Zappi's starts. Name them. Mac Jones this season. 29th in touchdown passes. 26th in yards. But most importantly, 28th in QBR. Does Belichick and Patricia deserve blame? No question. Matter of fact, as I just mentioned, Belichick's at the top of the list. But I can remember very well another quarterback, SEC quarterback, as a matter of fact, who inherited a 2-14 team with a coach that we're not even that high on. And within 2 years, he had them in the Super Bowl. His name is Joe Burrow. You can tell pretty quickly if a guy is a franchise quarterback. Heck, in year 3, you guys know, I talked about Tua yesterday. I'll talk about him in depth more today with the Dolphins-Niners game, which is huge for him. You guys know I'm not that high on Tua. Tua's, when you talk about their best games, Tua's got like 7-8 games that are better than Mac's best game. Now, Tua's in year 3. He's proving it when he has to. The question is, because the Patriots, I'm here to tell you right now, folks, they are not going to make the playoffs. So Patriots fans, I know some Patriots fans. Shout out to my man Grady Edwards. Don't get your hopes up. Because again, you look at this schedule, and I said this back in May, it's brutal. After this, they got at the Arizona Cardinals. They'll probably win that game, although I'm not certain. At the Raiders, against Derek Carr, Josh Jacobs, and Devontae Adams, who are playing very well now. They got Joe Burrow. They got Tua and the Dolphins offense. And then they finish at Buffalo. I'd be shocked if they won more than one of those games. Matter of fact, I said coming into the season, they would win 1 and finish 7-10. Looks like that's exactly what's going to happen. You could see. You can tell pretty early. Okay, there's something there. What have we seen with Mac Jones? He's accurate. You know, it's kind of like being a chef. It's like he or she's a good chef because they don't chop their finger off. Well, that's sort of the bare minimum. He's turned into a turnover machine, check down master, bad arm. He's not a franchise quarterback, folks. He's a backup. Because when there are calls from Patriots fans, calls from the national media saying, hey, that Bailey Zappi guy, you better watch out. You think Bailey Zappi's a threat to Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert or Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence or Tua? Come on now. Nobody. Or Jalen Hurts. A lot of young quarterbacks who've been drafted in the last 3 years. We're not questioning if Bailey Zappi's better than Kyler Murray. Mac Jones, though, it's a different conversation. There's a reason for that. He's not that guy. I've been telling you since the draft, he's not that guy. I mean, to think that this guy was slated to possibly be the number 3 overall pick in 2021, it's unbelievable. I mean, look, I know there's draft bust every year, but man, would that not have been a colossal mistake by the 49ers to take Mac Jones? I don't know what Trey Lance is. I loved him out of the draft. You guys know that. I love Trey Lance out of the draft. He's barely played. I don't know. He ain't this bad. What he's put on tape, not as bad as what Mac Jones put on tape. I'll tell you that much right now. When you have the quarterback, but you don't have the coach, a la the Los Angeles Chargers, there's a clear direction for the organization to go. Staley, if the Chargers miss the playoffs, Brandon Staley's not retaining his job. If you got the coach, but you don't have the quarterback, think of a team, the Cleveland Browns a couple years ago. Kevin Stefanski, like, man, this guy can coach. And Baker Mayfield, it's like, okay, yeah, we've got the guy. We've got the guy who can lead this organization. We do not have the quarterback. They moved on. But when you have both a bad coach and a bad quarterback, man, you are some serious, you know what? Ask the Denver Broncos. You can move on from the coach after this year because he's not on a $250 million contract. But yeah, it's a mess in New England. They'll win one more game, probably against Arizona, and that'll be it. 7-10 football team. As for the Buffalo Bills, let me get a drink of water for this. Because I darn near dehydrated myself talking about the Patriots. As for the Buffalo Bills, again, Josh Allen, for a guy who obviously threw for a little over 200 yards, threw for a couple touchdown passes, played very well. Again, he had a QBR 0 to 100 of 90. So in the passes he did throw, he actually did get, he was great. Had a pass rating of 100. But there was something I saw from the Buffalo Bills last night. And it wasn't like extraordinary. But it was something I'm like, okay, wait a minute. If they can continue to do this, they absolutely can beat Kansas City. And that is, for the first time seemingly all season, they developed a running game. They developed a running game. They ran for 138 yards as a team. 132 yards as a team. And they did it by committee. Again, Josh Allen obviously ran for 8 times for 20 yards. He wasn't as much of a factor as he normally is, but they didn't have to rely on Josh Allen to get those key yards. James Cook, who is Dalvin Cook's younger brother, played well. Okay? 14 carries, 64 yards, 4.6 yards a clip. That'll work. Devin Singletary, 13 for 51. A touchdown. That'll work if he's good down the red zone. They did it by committee. They don't have a star back. Okay, Singletary, Cook, Hines, those guys aren't stars. But to beat Kansas City, if you want to look at a model how to do it, look at the Patriots back in the AFC title game in 2018 when they went to Arrowhead and beat Kansas City. Time of possession was like 40-20. Now, the game still went to overtime because Kansas City had the much better roster and coach. But when you have a quarterback who doesn't turn the ball over, Tom Brady, when you have a running game which is just gashing it right down their throats, when you're able to convert on third down, making those third downs easier because you have an effective running game, that's hard to stop. And you're keeping the ball out of Patrick Mahomes' hands as much as possible. And again, they did this late in the fourth quarter, or early in the fourth quarter, which pretty much put the game away. Made it 24-7. They put together a drive. 15 plays, 94 yards. It took 8 minutes and 55 seconds off the clock. So you essentially took 15% of the game off the clock in one drive. You converted on third down. You imposed your will on the New England Patriots. As I always say about the game of football, it's a complicated game in terms of schematics, but in terms of the overall objective, it is very simple. Move another grown man against his will. That's what football is at the end of the day. And if you're able to do that, you're going to be highly successful. That's what the Bills did last night against a Patriots defense that has been down this year, but in some areas respectable. Okay, Matthew Judon is in the running with along with Micah Parsons and Nick Bosa to win the sack title. So he's been good. They have a corner, forgot his name, Jones, I think is his name. He's played well. And Buffalo just ran it down New England's throat. They converted on third down when they had to. Josh Allen was efficient all night, didn't turn the ball over. When you talk about the way to beat Kansas City, that's how you do it. The Bengals have the method to do it. They have Joe Mixon in the running game. They can hit explosive plays, but I don't know, to beat Kansas City, do you really want to have to win, 38-35 when you could win 27-20? Keep the ball out of Patrick Mahomes' hands for a long time. Possess the ball with Joe Mixon. Okay, get the short passing game with Hayden Hurst, with Tyler Boyd. And then when you have to, hit the big plays over the top with Jamar Chase and get the ball to T. Higgins down in the red zone. Again, football's a very simple game. Not in terms of X's and O's and schematics, but moving a grown man against his will. That is exactly what the Buffalo Bills did all night long. And if they keep this up, yes, they are back to being the number one threat to the Kansas City Chiefs. Tennessee could be because they have Derrick Henry and they have a good defense, but we don't trust Ryan Tannehill. Josh Allen, the biggest moments, has proven to be really good, okay? We saw last year against Kansas City in the playoffs. It was remarkable. He has a winning playoff record. Very few quarterbacks playing today can say that. It's only guys like, obviously, Brady and Mahomes. Burrow can say that. There's not many. Can Rodgers say it? Yeah, I guess Rodgers can because he had that one run in 2010. Since then, he has a losing record of the postseason. But that is how the how the Bills beat the Patriots last night is exactly how they can beat Kansas City. Run the ball down their throats, keeping the ball out of the best player in the world's hands, converting on third down, not turning the ball over. Again, it sounds perfect in theory, but that's kind of how you got to do it because there's a very good chance Buffalo will have to go on the road to Kansas City to Arrowhead Stadium. And we know that place is darn near impossible to win. You got to have Tom Brady or you have Joe Burrow to win in the playoffs against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid at Arrowhead. Otherwise, you're pretty much screwed. Okay? That's how it works. But a good win for the Bills last night. Get to 9-3, and hey, they're going to be big Bengals fans over the weekend, okay? Because if the Bengals beat the Chiefs, Bills are right back to being the number one seed because both teams will be 9-3, but Buffalo will have the tiebreaker because they beat Kansas City head-to-head. So, like I said, good win for the Buffalo Bills. So, like I said, the World Cup has been wild. Again, our U.S. team plays tomorrow to start the round of 16 at 10 a.m. Eastern on Fox. They play the Netherlands. I guess would it be un-American for me to say that I'm not confident whatsoever in our chances? If you remember, I said we're going to get out of group stage. Obviously, the draw against Wales was very disappointing, but we were able to get out of the game versus England with a draw, and then we took care of business against Iran. Christian Pulisic did his thing. Quite literally took one for the team, but looks like he's going to be ready to go. I think they said it was not a groin contusion. It was a contusion of something. But according to him, he's going to be ready to go. According to his teammates, he's texted them saying, "Hey, I'm going to go on Saturday." So we'll see what happens. Let's go USA. I'm excited. But we also have college football, and the big games start. We don't have to wait for tomorrow, folks. We don't have to sleep. We got a big game tonight that has all kinds of playoff implications. Utah and USC for the Pac-12 title game. And we also have other games tomorrow, Championship Saturday. Kansas State, TCU. Again, TCU loses. It'll partly depend on whether USC loses. But if TCU loses, they're out. Ohio State's in. Now, what you want real chaos? Have USC and TCU lose. Then what do you do? Seriously, if that happens, I may do a live on Sunday morning. I don't know if I'll get somebody in here on the show to do the show with me. I may do a show. Sorry, I will do a show on Sunday morning as the playoff teams are announced if both TCU and USC loses. And by the way, there's a very good chance. There's a very realistic chance of that happening. USC is only a favorite by a field goal against Utah, who, by the way, beat them this year. And TCU is only a 1.5-point favorite against Kansas State. If that happens, Ohio State's definitely in. What do you do with Alabama? Because if you guys remember, I said last week when Bama was ranked 7th, I said Bama's getting in the playoff. They're going to get some help ahead of them. It turned out, I thought because Ohio State got destroyed at home in the second half by Michigan, I figured, hey, Bama doesn't have a loss that bad. Their losses come by combined 4 points to two great teams. LSU's not great. Tennessee, when healthy, is a great football team. They're 7th ranked in the country. Okay, my Vols. Go Vols. Hopefully we can beat Clemson in the Orange Bowl should that come to pass, and it looks like it probably will. But the point being, that happens, I think my prediction has a very good chance of occurring, where both Ohio State and Alabama get in. Telling you, the committee has an Alabama bias. We know that. If they're presented with the opportunity to get them in, they'll get in. Then you also obviously got LSU, Georgia. Of course, LSU did control their own destiny. We thought, hey, 2-loss team, got a shot to get in the playoff. Okay, you already clinched the SEC West. If you could just take care of business against 4-7 Texas A&M, but they couldn't even do that. So LSU's out of the mix, but they do play Georgia tomorrow for the SEC title game. Obviously Georgia's in the playoff. They've been dominant all year. They've already got a spot, locked in. If they were to lose, though, the only thing that would do for Georgia is just lower their seeding. Honestly, I'm not so sure. A part of it would depend on whether TCU loses or not, because TCU is also undefeated. But worst case, Georgia would fall to 3 if they were to somehow lose against LSU. But I'll predict that. And then Purdue, Michigan. Purdue's not even ranked. And they're in the Big Ten championship game against the second-ranked team in America, the Michigan Wolverines, who are, of course, flying high right now after a big win over the Ohio State Buckeyes. So sorry to fans of UCF and Tulane. I'm not predicting the American Athletic Conference championship game. And I'm not predicting the ACC championship game. Sorry, Clemson fans. Not sorry. I said your team was a fraud from the beginning, and they were. And North Carolina fans, what happened to North Carolina, folks? I love Mac Brown as a head coach. But what the heck happened to the Tar Heels to finish the regular season? That was bad. They have not been playing good football. So my gut tells me Clemson probably wins that game, and then they get an Orange Bowl against my Vols. But we'll see. I would like to draw Clemson. I'll tell you that much right now. Jalen Hyatt would go off. All right, though. Championship Saturday. Here we go. Time to predict the game. Starting with tonight. Got the intense music for this one because these are big, big games. The Utah Utes, the USC Trojans for the Pac-12 title game an hour and a half from now. This is a big one, folks. USC in this game is favored by a field goal, and that line sounds perfect to me. Neutral site, Las Vegas, Allegiant Stadium. Feels perfect to me. USC, as we know, handed USC the one blemish on their resume with a 1-point victory on a 2-point conversion in Utah. Here's what we know about the Utes. Cam Rising, their quarterback, has had a tremendous year. He's top 10 in QBR. And in terms of the Utah offense, they went off on the USC defense, putting up 562 yards. Went toe-to-toe with a guy who, to me, is the obvious Heisman Trophy winner. With all due respect to the other candidates, it is clearly Caleb Williams. The job that Lincoln Riley has done with him, the job that he's done commanding this offense has been remarkable to watch. This feels like tonight a quarterback battle. Back and forth, up and down the field. Expect to see a lot of yards and a lot of points. Defense is going to be optional for this game. And we know USC can certainly get, to use the name of this show, carved up on the defensive end of the football. But, and I have a bet writing on this game. I'm not saying I have rooting interests, because my Vols are not a part of championship weekend, even though I thought we would be for a second there. I'm not saying I have rooting interests, but it'd be nice if I didn't have to lose a second bet in 2022 to my man Barry Grant Jr., the host of the All Even podcast. Shout out to Barry. He's a big USC fan. We bet that USC wouldn't make the playoff before the season, so I'm very nervous. Not saying I'm rooting for Utah, but all kidding aside, let's bring in some objectivity. While Cam Rising, this Utah offense has been outstanding this year, they have a couple of shaky losses in the resume. Florida went 6-6 this season. Utah wasn't able to beat them when they had a big drive down the field on the goal line. Cam Rising threw a big pick. I don't trust Utah late in games the way I trust USC. Again, keep in mind, folks, Utah doesn't get that 2-point conversion. USC's the third-ranked team in the country right now. Without a question, they're undefeated. They're going to be in the college football playoff. Simply, if Utah does not get a simple 2-point conversion to win the game. I think it's close. However, I trust Caleb Williams to make another big play like he's been doing all season long, and the USC Trojans will be your Pac-12 champions. Incredibly, after a 4-8 season last year, firing Clay Helton after a tumultuous tenure there, bringing in Lincoln Riley from the University of Oklahoma, the fact that Oklahoma fans had the audacity to say that they would not miss this man. Sure about that? Sure about that, Boomer Sooner? I don't know. USC wins this game 41-38 over the Utah Utes to advance, to win the Pac-12 title game, but also, more importantly, to advance and secure a spot in the college football playoff. I think this could be a very exciting game tonight. I really like USC, by the way, so I don't want to make it sound like I'm rooting against them. I'm rooting for myself, okay? Not having to lose this bet to Barry. And you'll see what the loser of the bet has to do very soon. We'll leave it at that. Next one, though. Tomorrow, noon Eastern on ABC. Kansas State, TCU, a battle of top 10s. Okay, Kansas State finished the season strong, a 9-3 record. We know they could put up a lot of points. Okay, they did so on teams like Oklahoma, West Virginia, Kansas. Kansas State score a lot. They can drop 40 on you in the blink of an eye. Okay, they got a tremendous running game, but for TCU, obviously. And I've been very shaky on TCU all season long. I think most people have. Because we look at them, we're saying, okay, just an eye test. This team cannot beat Georgia. This team cannot beat Michigan. I think most people would favor USC. I don't think this team with a healthy Hendon Hooker could beat my Tennessee Volunteers. This team cannot beat Alabama or Ohio State. Max Duggan, though, in my view, is a Heisman Trophy finalist. Sonny Dykes will be in the running along with Lincoln Riley, Josh Heupel and company for Coach of the Year. He's done a remarkable job in year one with these TCU Horned Frogs. But doesn't it feel like TCU's been living on borrowed time a little bit? Only scored 17 on Texas. They survived literally at the gun against Baylor. Okay, they needed to come back to beat Texas Tech and West Virginia. They needed a second half comeback to beat the same Kansas State team. I have a feeling that this game is yet another close one for TCU. But I think Max Duggan makes one mistake at the end. Kansas State capitalizes, and they shake up the playoff big time. Give me Kansas State to win the Big 12 title game over TCU. 34-30. TCU, again, only a 1.5-point favorite. How many times, folks, the third-ranked team in the country is only a 1.5 favorite in their conference title game? That, folks, should tell you everything you need to know. Listen, the wide receiver for TCU, I forgot his name, is going to be a first-round NFL receiver. He's remarkable. Again, Max Duggan, to me, has earned the right to go to New York City as a Heisman Trophy finalist. But I just have a feeling, getting a second look at him, getting Kansas State lost 38-28 against TCU earlier this season. Get a second look at him, get some film on him, make adjustments. They will win the Big 12 title game, and TCU's playoff hopes will be in some serious jeopardy. Moving on now to a game we thought would have big playoff implications on both sides. Now it's just for one. LSU, Georgia for the SEC title game at 4 Eastern on CBS. Georgia, no surprise here, is a massive favorite in this game, minus 17.5 over the Tigers. Obviously, LSU this season had a very impressive resume, right? Their losses come on a missed extra point, which I actually remember talking about on the show back in September, on a blocked extra point, I should say, against Florida State, who, by the way, have had a great year by their standards, the way they've been playing the last few years. Florida State was great this season, okay? And they got smoked at home by my Vols. But they rebounded, okay? They beat Alabama on a 2-point conversion to win it. They dominated Ole Miss, which, Ole Miss at the time, you got to remember, was 7th ranked. Okay, they took care of business against teams like Arkansas and UAB, but then they ran into 4-7 Texas A&M. And Texas A&M said, you know what? We had college football playoffs hopes coming into the season, being the 5th-ranked team in the country in the preseason. We know for sure we're not even making it to a bowl game. So we're going to ruin your season too. And they did just that in dominant fashion against LSU last week. However, I will say this, okay? Brian Kelly, year one at LSU, I knew he'd be a great hire for the Tigers because now he gets SEC talent as opposed to Notre Dame talent. I knew he'd do a great job. I did not see SEC championship game year one, however. But the Cinderella ride, Jaden Daniels, great season for him, but the Cinderella ride comes to an end in dominant fashion. Georgia wins big. They strike early. They don't look back. 41-17. Again, you guys know I'm not high at all on Stetson Bennett. I don't know of a single NFL scout who thinks of him as an NFL talent. But in terms of the running game with McIntosh, the passing game with Brock Bowers, and that defense, which is once again, second straight year, easily the best in college football in terms of points per game. They've allowed the fewest touchdowns in the country. Georgia wins dominantly, 41-17. And to the Big Ten title game, it's Purdue and it's Michigan. Michigan, like Georgia, is a massive favorite over the underdog Boilermakers, 16.5, minus 16.5. That game, by the way, kicks off at 8 Eastern on Fox. Here's the thing for Michigan. The one question I had about the Wolverines going into last week when I picked them to lose to Ohio State, the one thing was I trust C.J. Stroud a lot more than I trust J.J. McCarthy. I think Jim Harbaugh's a better coach than Ryan Day, who, by the way, Ohio State fans, y'all sound darn near delusional on Ryan Day. Get off this man's back. He's a heck of a coach. Just because he's not Urban Meyer doesn't mean he's not a good coach. As for Michigan, though, I doubted that J.J. McCarthy could put them in position in the passing game to go toe-to-toe with Ohio State, considering that explosive offense they have there, to make the throws on third down, to push the ball down the field consistently and accurately. I stand corrected. I was wrong. He vastly and undeniably outplayed C.J. Stroud, who very well is going to be a Heisman finalist. So props to J.J. McCarthy. But this running game, it's remarkable with this Michigan team. Blake Corum goes down. A guy who was possibly, until, Caleb Williams played the way he did against Notre Dame, possibly the Heisman frontrunner. But he gets hurt last week, or a couple weeks ago, against Illinois. And in steps what was his name? Edwards, I think is his name. Steps in and goes crazy on Ohio State. I want to get his name right because I don't want to. I want to give that man the respect he deserves. Because, by the way, he had a great post-game interview, which I love. Yeah, Donovan Edwards, who's a sophomore, ran for 216 and 9.8 yards a carry against Ohio State with 2 tutties. Expect more of the same from Michigan. They'll take care of Purdue, who, by the way, has a very limited offense. Sorry to Boilermaker fans. Drew Brees isn't walking through that door anytime soon. Michigan wins this game quite easily, 38-14, to win the Big Ten title game and obviously to clinch their spot in the college football playoff. So let's stop the music for a moment. Let's see, get myself back on the screen here. Hang on. All right, there we go. So should these games play out the way that I think they're going to play out? Michigan, Georgia, and USC all win. Obviously, all three in the playoff. I think Georgia and Michigan's in the playoff to begin with. Their resume speaks for itself. They're in whether they win or lose. But what happens if TCU loses, which I think they will? Then what happens? It'll be a debate between TCU, Ohio State, and Alabama. Now, we have to take Alabama out, unfortunately. Now, listen, if USC and TCU both lose, Alabama still has a shot. But the committee made a statement last week by putting Ohio State, despite getting destroyed at home by Michigan. Again, at home. Want to emphasize that. Bama never lost at home. By putting Ohio State ahead of Alabama, they essentially said, if something happens, Ohio State's going to get in, because obviously neither Ohio State or Alabama plays this weekend. So they were essentially saying up front, being blunt and honest, saying, if something happens, we think Ohio State is a better football team and has been more consistent in their play than Alabama has. So, should this happen, folks, and I'll read it off of the podcast audience, excuse me, this is what the college football playoff will look like. Again, if the results come to pass, as I think they will, with Georgia, Michigan, and USC all winning their conference title games and TCU losing, this is what will look like. Georgia and Michigan stay at 1 and 2. No surprise there. USC will obviously move up to 3. And the Ohio State Buckeyes will make the college football playoff. You're telling me, look, obviously a blowout loss against Michigan looks really bad. And again, if it were me, I'd rather have Alabama in than Ohio State because I think they match up better physically with Georgia. Which, by the way, you see down there, Alabama's 5, TCU falls all the way to 6 in my view. Ohio State gets in over TCU. You say, well, TCU made the conference championship game. Yeah, they played a lot of close games with below-average Big 12 teams. And we know about the Big 12 this year, folks. Excuse me. It's probably been the second worst or worst conference of the Power 5. SEC is obviously the best. Pac-12 is obviously second best. But we talk about the ACC. I get the ACC has no playoff contenders, but Clemson's top 10. Florida State is making a strong case to possibly be in the top 10. ACC has some good football teams. UNC's in the top 25 and in the ACC title game. This is what's going to look like. Ohio State's resume compared to TCU's, not even close. Ohio State's best win is on the road against a team that is currently 8th ranked in the country in Penn State. They went to Happy Valley and won. TCU's best win is Texas. I mean, Texas is good. Probably get a decent bowl game, but Penn State, Texas. You tell me who's better. What's the more impressive win? So this is what's going to look like if the results come to pass as I think they will. Obviously, I'm rooting for USC loss, not because I dislike USC. I have great respect for USC and Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams. But I'm just telling you right now, if the results come to pass as I think they will, this is what the top 6 will look like. 4 teams, obviously, most importantly, because it's a 4-team playoff. That'll change to 12 in 2024. Georgia, Michigan, USC, Ohio State. And then the first 2 teams out will be Alabama and TCU. There you go. It all starts tonight. We don't have to wait till tomorrow. All the drama starts tonight. And then by the second game, the second conference title game, by the time that one's over, we'll have a much, much clearer picture as to who's in the playoff. Georgia and Michigan are the only teams today that are guaranteed win or lose to get in. No question about it. Because their resumes, because of what they put on the field on a consistent basis, that they'll be in. No question. 3 and 4, up for grabs for, to me, 3 through 6. Alabama is still alive. If USC wins tonight, Bama's playoff hopes shut. If TCU wins tomorrow, Ohio State's playoff hopes shut. And then we'll pretty much know exactly what order. It'll pretty much say exactly the same as it did this weekend. But as Reese Davis always says, the great Reese Davis on ESPN, it always plays itself out. By the way, the Pac-12 title game, before I get to my NFL predictions, just want to say this. The Pac-12 title game, it's a big full circle moment from 2019. Because in 2019, USC was either they were ranked 4th or 5th in the playoff poll. So Utah. Yeah, Utah was ranked 4th or 5th in the playoff poll. Had Utah won, they would have gotten in the college football playoff. But here comes Oregon with Justin Herbert. They beat Utah. Utah's out. Jalen Hurts leads Oklahoma to a Big 12 title against Baylor. Oklahoma gets in. Now, we know what happened once Oklahoma got in when they faced Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. Was it Jefferson that had like 5 touchdowns in the first half? Burrow had like 7 touchdowns in the first half. I mean, Oklahoma had a historically bad defense. LSU had a historically unstoppable offense. I mean, it wasn't like Utah was going to put up a better fight than Oklahoma was, because I still hold true that LSU team in 2019 is the greatest college football team of all time. But now, again, the only team 3 through 6 that I think can beat, or at least I wouldn't say can beat Georgia. I think Michigan's the only team that can beat Georgia, like has a realistic shot. But that would at least give a prayer's chance to is Alabama. If Ohio State got beat up by Michigan, who has a just ever so slightly worse defense than Georgia, what are they going to do against Georgia? That was at home for Ohio State. Okay. Alabama physically, with those athletes and with Nick Saban, I'd obviously pick Georgia, but I give Alabama a shot. I'll just say that much. Like I said, it's 6:50 Eastern right now. live on Facebook Live, YouTube, Twitter. Game tips off in a little more of an hour. Best believe I'll be in front of my TV watching to see what goes down. It's going to be fun. By the way, even in the NBA, we got good matchups. I mean, tonight, Giannis versus LeBron. We only get 2 of those a year. Possibly one if LeBron's obviously been dealing with injuries as he gets up there in age. So, enjoy this while we have it. Second best player in the world, Giannis, against the 5th or 6th best player in the world, LeBron. Yeah, you take those matchups. It's going to be fun. And then my Warriors obviously take on the Bulls at 10. Hopefully we can get a dub there. All right. Now to the NFL. Now to the king of television, to a league that just recently, 8 days ago, had its highest rated regular season game of all time, that being Cowboys-Giants. So the NFL is in as good of a place as ever in terms of popularity. You saw those crowds in Germany, in London every year, in Mexico City. The NFL is literally becoming an international sport. It really is. And think, not one team is even outside the U.S. We don't have a team in Canada. We don't have a team in Mexico. I know Goodell suggested London. I don't think that'd be the greatest idea in terms of travel. But this could be interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes. I will say this before I get my predictions, though. Adam Schefter just tweeted this a few minutes ago because it's worth mentioning. Players that are out on Sunday include Kadarius Toney, Mike Williams, Corey Linsley, Elijah Mitchell, Aaron Donald, Matthew Stafford, Danico Autry, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Robert Quinn, David Njoku, Brandon Cooks, Derek Stingley Jr., and Christian Darrisaw, David Bakhtiari, and Jaquan Brister. I saw Bakhtiari had a appendectomy today, which sounds very painful. Joe Burrow had one before the season, so certainly wish the best to Bakhtiari and, of course, all the other injured players as well. Week 13, the NFL. Y'all know what time it is. Let's get it going right now. So, we're going to start with the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Atlanta Falcons. In this game, Pittsburgh is favored by a point. It's gone back and forth, up and down between those two teams. Okay, but in terms of a line, you see there's a lot of games this week where there's a 1-point favorite. Pittsburgh, a 1-point favorite on the road. Again, for Atlanta, this is a little bit of an elimination game. If you fall to 8 losses, considering you got to face Brady later this season, we know Tom Brady has never lost to Atlanta in his career. Is he 10-0, 11-0? Something like that. But he's never lost to Atlanta in his career, famously. Okay, but you got Pittsburgh coming in. So Pittsburgh, a little bit of a short week coming off of a big road win against the Indianapolis Colts. Kenny Pickett was fine. George Pickens was, per usual, phenomenal. And Mike Tomlin did a remarkable coaching job, although he was facing Jeff Saturday. So I'm not going to act like Mike Tomlin beat Andy Reid or something. But they did win the game, and Pittsburgh's now trying to build their first winning streak of the entire season. So Kenny Pickett comes in, 3 touchdowns, 8 picks. Numbers do not blow you away, but he's shown you flashes. He's shown you he has improved from when he entered the game against the New York Jets compared to now, coming off that game against the Colts. He has improved. He looks more comfortable. His teammates respond to him well. Kenny Pickett has played decent football by his standards, by the Steelers' offense standards over the last month. So they're going into Atlanta for a Falcons team that is struggling right now. They just lost to the Commanders, a Falcons offense that, by the way, just lost Kyle Pitts for the season, only scored 13 points against a Chase Young-less Washington defense. I get there at home. I understand that. But it's Mike Tomlin. I'm going to roll with Mike Tomlin. I'm going to roll with the Pittsburgh Steelers defense led by TJ Watt. I think they hold Atlanta's offense in check. I think it's fairly close, but I think the Steelers ultimately get it done in the end, 23-20. And again, it's a 1-point spread. Very good chance that it could change to Atlanta -1 by kickoff. But this is about what's going to be. One of these teams are going to be favored -1 because they're about as evenly matched as it gets. Give me the Steelers to win this game 23-20 over the Atlanta Falcons. We've got a divisional matchup, but it's between two teams that are pretty much eliminated. It's the Green Bay Packers with Aaron Rodgers against the Chicago Bears with Justin Fields. So at least we're going to get exciting quarterback play. I suggested again a week ago, Aaron's hurt. He's dealing with a thumb injury. Now he's dealing with a rib issue. You're out of the playoffs. Go with Jordan Love. Okay, look good. Darius Slay in his podcast, by the way, cornerback for the Eagles, was talking about facing Jordan Love, and he was like, he looked comfortable. He had the poise. He was throwing the ball with confidence. A lot of the things that I was talking about on Monday. Part of the reason I'd say start in the rest of the year. You're out of the playoffs. See what the kid's got and make your decision on the quarterback situation after the year. depending on his play, and trade Aaron Rodgers and get a haul, get some draft picks, fire Matt LaFleur, go into a rebuild. That easy. That easy. Here's what we do know. A, that the Packers are favored by a field goal on the road. B, Chicago's defense has been awful ever since they traded Robert Quinn and Roquan Smith. Awful. Since those two trades, okay? They've given up 35 to Miami, 31 to Detroit, 27 to Atlanta, 31 to the Jets. Now, some of those offenses aren't known for being explosive. The Jets, obviously, with Mike White, upgrade over Zach Wilson, but not 31 points upgrade. Okay? Detroit's obviously explosive offense. Atlanta, 27. I mean, come on now. So Chicago's defense is struggling. Christian Watson seems to be finding a little bit more of a rhythm. We know the kid can fly. It was really a confidence issue with him the first half of the season, just catching the simple passes. It feels like that first drop against Minnesota kind of got into his head for a while. He snapped out of it against Dallas. He played well against Tennessee, and then he played well against last week against the Philadelphia Eagles. Had that long touchdown that got the Packers back in the game for the moment. So the Packers, relying on Aaron Jones, relying on A.J. Dillon. Aaron Rodgers is going to play. And what do we know about Aaron Rodgers? He is not Jerry Jones. He is, Aaron Rodgers, the primary owner of the Dallas Cowboys, and he is a co-owner of the Chicago Bears. So I'm rolling with the Packers. Give me Green Bay to win this game. Not to cover, though. Expect a lot of points because both these defenses have struggled badly, especially to stop the run. We know Chicago can run it down your throat, but I trust Aaron Rodgers simply because he does own the Chicago Bears. Give me the Packers 31-29 over Chicago. Got a couple comments here. Excuse me, I got a little cough. From Grady Edwards, he asked, is Rodgers done or is it just an off year? I think it's off year. I don't think Rodgers is washed per se as, say, a Matt Ryan or a Russell Wilson. Like, those guys just look completely incapable of doing anything out there. Aaron Rodgers has at least shown you flashes. Against Dallas, against Chicago earlier this year. He had a decent game against the Giants and the Patriots. So we've seen flashes from Aaron Rodgers that we have not seen from Russ or Matt Ryan. So I think the injuries are playing a factor. I think definitely the thumb injury is playing a factor in his accuracy. Again, I still see for Green Bay the best thing for them is to commit to a rebuild, have a direction moving forward. This is not a title contending team, and give Aaron Rodgers for the service that he gave to the Packers for many years, won them a Super Bowl and a Super Bowl MVP, and a lot of regular season MVPs. Put him in a position where he can succeed next year, and I think he'll be back, in that discussion as a top 5 quarterback in the league. I don't think he's done though. Declining maybe, but done, I highly doubt that. It is now time for Bryson's Bleak Bet. It is the one game every week that I have absolutely no confidence in betting, or picking, I should say. But, gotta pick it. Jacksonville Jaguars, Detroit Lions. Detroit in this game is favored -1, which feels appropriate. Again, like I told you earlier, we got a lot of games where a team is only a point favorite. We talk about Pittsburgh's favored by a point. Detroit at home against Jacksonville, favored by a point. Here's what I'm looking at with this game. I'm sorry, my bad. Excuse me. Jaguars are favored by a point. Obviously, Jacksonville coming in off an emotional, exciting home win on that 2-point conversion on the best drive of Trevor Lawrence's pro career to this point against a great Baltimore Ravens team. For Jacksonville, they're going into Detroit. Now, the Lions obviously lost in heartbreaking fashion on a walk-off field goal against the Buffalo Bills at home on Thanksgiving, but they get a few extra days to prepare. Again, Jacksonville, it's a very young team. It's not like a veteran team who's coming off a close win, but they understand the mistakes they made for that game to be close, and they adjust. It's a young football team. Trevor Lawrence, as many young quarterbacks do, has peaks and valleys. I expect him to play well in this game against a Lions defense that is not very good. But this is a Lions offense against a defense in Buffalo that's better than Jacksonville's that went up and down the field. Amon-Ra St. Brown has been arguably the most underrated receiver in football this year. Jared Goff has played well. They've run the ball well with Swift and Williams, Jamal Williams. So I'm going to take the Detroit Lions, not confident at all. Remember I said about the Jags, they'd lose a lot of close games this year, and they'd win some close games this year. Play some tight ones because they're a young, talented football team. But I think Detroit wins this one 28-24. Again, it's Bryson's Bleak Bet, so I'm not confident in this pick whatsoever. 2, 4, and 7 teams, but give me the Lions to win this one 28-24 over the Jacksonville Jaguars. Let's go to one of the more interesting ones. Now I can't wait to watch this. New York Jets, Minnesota Vikings. Vikings at home are favored by a field goal, which means Vegas is saying these two teams are evenly matched. Vikings favored by a field goal. Here's what I'm looking at. It's Mike White's second start this season. Obviously, it's sort of the argument I made earlier for Bailey Zappi over Mac Jones. Mike White's best start this season. Mike White's one start this season is he was much more productive than Zach Wilson was in any of his starts this season. And even last season, you could argue. So for Mike White, Vikings defense gets film on him. They get a few extra days to prepare. I understand that. I expect Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson to per usual, go off. But here's to me the difference maker and why I'm a little hesitant on Minnesota. You guys know I love Minnesota. Said they win the division before the season going away. They're going to do that. Heck, if they win tomorrow or on Sunday, they're going to do that. But when you have a Jets team coming in, playing great defense, force some turnovers on Kirk Cousins. We know he's prone to make those. He had a throw against the Patriots 10 days ago that was really bad. It was a what were you thinking type interception. If he gives you a couple of those, with the way that this Jets defensive line can get to the quarterback, the difference to me is the Vikings defense, particularly their pass defense, is horrible. You saw Mac Jones last night? Yeah, that same Mac Jones against the Minnesota Vikings threw for nearly 400 yards, had an amazing QBR and passer rating. That's how bad that defense is. They made Mac Jones look like a franchise quarterback. I expect Mike White not to play as well as he did against the Bears, because again, they did Leslie Frazier, not Leslie Frazier. I was thinking about him being the head coach of the Vikings years ago. Vikings defensive coordinator gets more film on him. I think he does make maybe a couple mistakes, but I'm going to take the Jets to win this game comfortably because of the fact that Minnesota cannot stop the pass. I think Kirk Cousins is going to turn the ball over. 31-14. Jets win this one over Minnesota, 31-14, and get to 8-4, which would be a huge win for them. All right, moving on to a divisional matchup between two playoff caliber teams. The Washington Commanders and the New York Giants. Washington in this game is favored -2 on the road. This is another situation where you got a team that played on Thanksgiving in the Giants, getting extra time to prepare. Brian Dable, we understand that. And you got Washington coming in without Chase Young, it looks like. And Antonio Gibson is iffy on whether or not he'll play. But here's what I'm looking at. It's kind of the same reason I picked the Cowboys to beat the Giants comfortably, by the way, on Thanksgiving Day. Because I figured they'd take Saquon Barkley away because, Saquon Barkley at times against the Cowboys has struggled. And Daniel Jones will make mistakes. For Washington, they are tremendous against the run. So I expect them to say 26 for the Giants is not beating us. If number 8 for the Giants beats us with that highly limited receiving core, we go to midfield after the game, we shake his hand, and we say, good game, Daniel Jones. But Ron Rivera, being the defensive mastermind he is not going to let that happen. Taylor Heineke's been playing turnover-free football. I think he will still get help from the running game with that Robinson kid, with an offensive line that's played so much better than it did the first month of the season. Terry McLaurin plays well against a beat-up Giants secondary. Washington wins this game and covers the 2-point spread, 27-21 over the New York Giants. It will be 3 straight losses for the Giants, and they'll have some serious concerns in terms of whether or not that they can get to the playoffs as a wild card team in the NFC. Washington wins over the New York Giants, 27-21. It is now time for my upset of the week. Give me the Tennessee Titans to beat the Philadelphia Eagles 30-27 in the city of brotherly love. And here is why. Expect this again to be a little bit of a high-scoring game. Philadelphia, we know. Here's what I'll give the Philadelphia Eagles offensively. They're the most explosive offense in the NFL that is led by the run game. Whether it be Jalen Hurts, who ran all over the Green Bay Packers last week, whether it be Miles Sanders, whoever they got. We obviously know they got deep threats down the field, whether it be A.J. Brown, whether it be Quez Watkins, or whether it be Devontae Smith. They got plenty of deep threats. I feel like if Tennessee is able to jump, we've seen this movie many times with the Tennessee Titans in their playoff wins. Jump out to a lead, Derrick Henry does his thing. Ryan Tannehill making safe throws. Treylon Burks and company in that receiving core. It's not great, but it's perfectly suited for a quarterback in Ryan Tannehill who's not exactly known to be a down-the-field type of passer. You stick with Derrick Henry against an Eagles defense that is bad against the run game. In the last few games that they've played, ever since the Houston game. So again, the Texas game is where I started to, sort of my eyebrows raised a little bit like, we found the Eagles' weakness. We found what will get them beat in the playoffs. Houston rushed for $168 on them. Okay? Washington rushed for $152 on them. The Indianapolis Colts, coached by Jeff Saturday, ran for 99 against them, but still almost a 100-yard game. And then the Packers last week with that running back tandem ran for $107 against them. Philly can't stop the run. And when you have the best running back in football with the Tennessee Titans, that's a problem. Philadelphia is a 4.5-point favorite. I feel like if the Eagles trail, they'll do exactly what they did against Washington and start to press a little bit. Nick Sirianni, offensive coordinator for Nick Sirianni and the offensive coordinator for the Eagles, going to look to take big shots down the field, take big risks. And that Tennessee secondary has been really good this season, and the pass rush also has been successful this year. Again, they held the Cincinnati Bengals to 20. That's a good defense. Eagles will still get theirs, but I think they'll have to play from behind from start to finish, and it won't be enough. Give me the Tennessee Titans in the upset of the week to beat the Philadelphia Eagles 30-27. Again, we know what Philadelphia's biggest flaw is. I believe whether they get a first-round bye or not, whether they beat the Cowboys for the East or not, it will get them beat in the playoffs immediately. One and done. And again, like I keep saying, if you guys think I'm crazy for saying that, just remember a year ago around this time, I said the Packers will be one and done. That's exactly what happened. Moving on now. What do we got next? Oh! The Let's Ride Broncos taking on the Baltimore Ravens. Before we get into that, we got a couple of comments here. Grady Edwards not showing any love, not showing any love for Lovey, or love for love, I guess is what he's talking about. No, love for Lovey. Gosh, it's confusing. Dang, man, hating on the Texans. I haven't even gotten to the Texans yet. Okay? I'll save that for later. Okay, that's an interesting game just because of the headlines surrounding that one, which I'll get to later. Actually, in the next game. But for this game, the Let's Ride Denver Broncos, who have more drama than any 3-win team that I can remember by this point in the season, taking on the Baltimore Ravens, who have one of the craziest stats in the NFL this season. Because they're 7-4, right? All four of their losses, they led by double digits at one point. So this has been the theme for the Ravens this season. We all remember, obviously, back in week 2, the Miami game. We remember the Giants game. Last week against Jacksonville, this team struggles to close out games. So coming in pissed off after the way they lost to Jacksonville. We know Lamar Jackson, the situation on Twitter, responded to the fan. He crossed the line a little bit, although I do get why Lamar was frustrated coming off of that loss. Pressure on him in regards to winning, even more in large part in getting a new contract this offseason. Big pressure, obviously, on Lamar Jackson. There's no question he feels it. You guys know I'm a big Lamar fan. Ravens are 9.5-point favorites. What do we know about the Broncos offense? Well, they're the worst in the NFL. Just for context on how bad Russell Wilson's been this season. You ready for this? So all 32 teams played in the NFL last week, in week 12. Russell Wilson, again, 32 teams in the NFL. Russell Wilson was the 33rd ranked quarterback. There's 32 teams, folks. So that means somebody's backup had a higher passer rating than one Russell Wilson. That's how bad he was. So Russell Wilson's been playing the worst football of his career. That's not a shock to anybody. Nathaniel Hackett's going to be gone by season's end. This is a Broncos offense that is last in the NFL in scoring. And frustratingly, if you are a Broncos fan, it's a Broncos defense that has been great this season. But there's going to be only so much they can do. Russell's not going to be able to move the ball down the field once again. The Ravens are going to win the field position battle, run it down Denver's throats. Lamar Jackson will be looking to make a statement. And against this defense, you can make a statement. Give me the Ravens to win this game and cover the 9.5-point spread. 32-16 over the Denver Broncos. Like I said, Denver is kind of notorious for not even getting out of the teens in terms of scoring. That'll continue once again this week against a very good Ravens defense. Baltimore wins 32-16 over the Denver Broncos. Broncos country. Let's cry. Let's see. Grady Edwards, any thoughts on Russ getting yelled at on the sideline? I talked about it Monday, but I will sort of reiterate my thoughts. What that situation said to me was a couple of things. Number one, how often do you see defensive linemen yelling at quarterbacks? Notably yelling at a quarterback who's making well over $40 million per season, who's got the biggest cap hit in the NFL. That don't happen much. But the fact that Russell Wilson barely even responded to the guy. Barely even responded. It was basically like, yeah, okay, what? It's like he's trying to stay in a character, trying to be the same, optimistic, let's ride. That same guy, right? And so that was a bad look. And secondly, this is a Broncos locker room that is flat out broken because of the head coach and because of the quarterback. And it's like what I talked about with the Patriots. When your head coach isn't performing up to par, when your quarterback really isn't performing up to par, not even close, that locker room will turn on you in the blink of an eye. And that's exactly what's happened in Denver. And that was just an outward showing of it. And again, we know of all the stories that have come out of Denver regarding Russ. But now this one about the birthday party thing, it's bad. It's just bad. This next one, though, very serious headlines surrounding this game. The Cleveland Browns, the Houston Texans. Most notably, of course, Deshaun Watson will be back after his 11-game suspension at Houston, of all places. So the Browns in this game on the road are favored by 7. Seems like a good line to me, considering the fact that they got a big win last week at home against the favored Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Nick Chubb did his thing, ran for the game-winning touchdown. Jacoby Brissett made all the plays he needed to down the stretch. So did Amari Cooper. And so you're facing a Texans team, which obviously is the worst team in football. 1 win on the season against the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's all they got. 1 win, 9 losses, 1 tie. They're terrible. You know, they're going to be in line to get a C.J. Stroud or somebody in the draft. For Deshaun Watson, what do we expect from him? Well, by Sunday, it will have been 700 days since his last NFL regular season game. So Russ is going to come into play. I'm sure he's been training in the last 2.5 months off of his suspension. You know, the preseason obviously helped him, I'm sure, in regards to getting acclimated with the offense, getting comfortable with the guys he has. Again, David Njoku out for this game, so sort of that safety blanket is gone. Does he have a rapport with their number 1 receiver, Amari Cooper? We don't know. But it's a really good Browns offensive line. Again, if there were ever a game for Deshaun Watson to come back to, this is the game. Now, you prefer, if you're Deshaun, for it to be in Cleveland as opposed to at Houston, your old stomping grounds, especially with reportedly some of his accusers are going to be in attendance. So there's all these storylines going on. I think Deshaun starts out rusty. I do think, though, he starts to find his footing around mid to late third quarter. Browns are going to rely heavily on the run, in part because Deshaun is trying to work his way back. I think the Browns will win this game by exactly what they're favored by, 7. Cleveland wins 24-17 over the worst team in football, the Houston Texans. Got a comment here from Grady. Excuse me. Grady says Russell Wilson acts like he's had a lobotomy sometimes. I don't know. Yeah. And he says, let's be honest, Deshaun Watson won't look good this season. Playing wise, he gets a total pass this season. That's fair. That's fair. And he says, and I dislike him. I don't really know who doesn't dislike Deshaun Watson, how he's handling the media. I mean, it's either Deshaun is an idiot with how he handles the media or needs to fire his PR people. One of the two or both. It's been a disaster. But going back to your previous comment, Grady, Deshaun won't look good this season. Playing wise, he gets a total pass. I agree. I do agree with that statement. It's, again, he hasn't played in 700 days. He gets a 6-game sample size. Is there a chance that Cleveland next week? I think the Browns play the Bengals next week, so good chance they'll be trailing in that game. They'll need Deshaun to sort of go back to being the old Deshaun in terms of that guy who is a top 5 level quarterback to go against Joe Burrow. Will he press a little bit? I agree. This is a 6-game sample size to work into next year. Build a rapport with the receivers. Get acclimated to the system, the coaching staff, Nick Chubb, the offensive line. That's what this is about. Because the Browns, by the way, are out of the playoff mix. They're not going to get in. They're 4-7. They're not getting in. but I do think they will win this game over Houston 24-17. Moving on to a divisional matchup. If you had ever told me that these two teams would be playing in Week 13, one would be 6-5, the other would be 3-8, I would have assumed that the records would be reversed, but they are not. The Seattle Seahawks are 6-5, and the Los Angeles Rams are 3-8. Seattle, Seattle in this game is favored -7. Let me get a drink of water. Gotta clear my throat there. Seattle in this game is basically favored by a touchdown over the Los Angeles Rams. Here's what I will tell you. John Wofford is going to start this game for the Los Angeles Rams. Matthew Stafford is reportedly out of concussion protocol. Sean McVay said he's not going to play. There's no point in putting him out there, risking it. At this point, if you're the Rams, just shut down Matthew Stafford for the season. Once Cooper Kupp gets off of IR, either keep him there or shut him down for the season. Aaron Donald is also out this weekend. Shut him down for the season. No point whatsoever in your three most important players and you winning the Super Bowl last season and you jeopardizing them in terms of their health for next season when you'll try to regroup, regather, understand what your goal is for next season. That's obviously with the talent that they have to try and win another Super Bowl. Seattle, though, coming off a heartbreaking loss at home against the Las Vegas Raiders, mostly at the hands of Josh Jacobs. But Geno Smith played very well in that game. They ran the ball very effectively. So there's no reason for Seattle, sure to be discouraged considering that they lost the game, but there's no reason for them whatsoever, especially on the road, SoFi Stadium, climate, the temperature, the conditions are not going to be a factor whatsoever in this game, obviously. So Seattle, I think, will win this game and cover the spread 27-17 over the just injury-ridden Los Angeles Rams, who Los Angeles should stand. It should be LOSS, Angeles Rams. That's how bad it's been. Let's see. Talking about Grady Edwards says they'll go 2-4, kind of what I expect for the Cleveland Browns with Deshaun Watson. That's fair. Real quick, let me check the Browns. I'll do that at the end of the show. After I do my predictions, I'll check the Browns' schedule in the last 6 games of the year. I know they got Houston Sunday, obviously. Sorry, guys. And they've got the Bengals next week. So we'll see what the final 4 games are after that. This is a big one. This is a game that I have been really looking forward to in terms of making a final judgment on a player that I've been very skeptical about. The Miami Dolphins go to the Bay Area. To take on the San Francisco 49ers. Niners in this game are favored -4. Obviously, we know Miami has one of the most explosive offenses in the NFL. Again, Tua has had, if you look at just Tua's stats, just his stats by themselves, it's a top 3-4 stat line in the NFL in terms of QBR, yards, touchdowns. Tua's been great. There's been folks out there, I think it's ridiculous, but there are folks out there debating, hey, should he be MVP over Jalen Hurts or Patrick Mahomes? I don't think so, but his play has been so good that has become a discussion. Tyreek Hill has put up typical Tyreek Hill numbers. He's proven this season to be the best receiver in football. We know the weapons they have there. Gesicki's having a big year. They're running the ball well. The offensive line has improved big time. But I'm looking at the 49ers, right? Underwhelming offensively last week. Dominant defensively. A 13-0 win last week against the New Orleans Saints. For San Francisco, first of all, they got something to prove offensively, considering how they played last week against New Orleans. Jimmy Garoppolo did not play well. The Niners didn't move the ball down the field all that well. They weren't great in the red zone. But fortunately enough, neither were the New Orleans Saints. And the Niners defense was a big reason for that. Here's a stat for San Francisco that is just mind-blowing, and it proves that they're the best defense in football. In their last 4 games, they have outscored their opponents 57-0 in the second half. So what does that mean? They make adjustments. Okay? I'm forgetting their D'Amico Ryans. D'Amico Ryans, their defensive coordinator, who's done a fantastic job, should get some head coaching interviews at season's end, has done a fantastic job with the likes of, obviously, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, Hufanga, stacked defense with a great defensive coordinator. I expect them to make the necessary adjustments in this game against the Miami Dolphins. And I will just go ahead and tell you right now, this is my candidate for...
Would I a betting man?
If I were a betting man, take the Niners to cover the 4-point spread and win this game 34-20 over the Miami Dolphins. I don't think they'll hold Miami scoreless in the second half, which they've been doing as of late. I think Miami, though, does get the majority of their points, probably the first 14 points or so in the first half. But San Francisco relies on the running game. Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel. Expect Deebo to get a lot of carries on Sunday afternoon against the Miami Dolphins. Against the Dolphins defense that struggled a little bit against really good offenses. So I think the Niners win by 2 scores pretty comfortably, 34-20 over the Miami Dolphins. Moving on to the next matchup. Between this is another big one. Probably the most, give me the most watched game of the weekend. That's not the Cowboys, because we know the Cowboys get great ratings every week. The second to that will be the Kansas City Chiefs and the Cincinnati Bengals. Chiefs on the road are favored -2. I just thought I'd throw in, I know it doesn't have a whole lot to do with the outcome of this game in terms of the importance of it, but it is at least worth mentioning that the Kansas City Chiefs have not won against the Cincinnati Bengals on the road since Ronald Reagan was president. You know, I'm a big fan of presidential history, so I had to throw that out there. Since President Reagan was in office, that was the last time that the Chiefs beat the Cincinnati Bengals in Cincinnati. It was 1984. The Bengals have since won 6 straight games against Kansas City. Here's what I'm looking at. You heard me say earlier, Kadarius Toney is out. So, Patrick Mahomes is without, once again, one of his top targets. But Juju Smith-Schuster played good football. Again, we know what Travis Kelce represents in terms of the downfield presence that he offers. As for the Bengals, it appears Jamar Chase is also going to be out this week. It's kind of dicey right now as it stands in the injury report. If you look at Jamar Chase, it says right here that he is questionable to play along with Joe Mixon. But here's the thing for Cincinnati. They just went on the road. It's one of the most impressive wins of the season to me. They went on the road against a hot Tennessee Titans team, in particular, a hot Tennessee Titans defense, and were great in the fourth quarter. Moved the ball down the field and then fine. Samaje Perine had a big game. T. Higgins was great. Caught a big touchdown pass from Joe Burrow. So now, at home, in their stomping grounds against a team that they beat twice last season. One in Cincinnati, and the more important one, on the road at Arrowhead Stadium in the AFC Championship game. They came back from 18 points down to beat the Kansas City Chiefs and get to Super Bowl 56. So is there the revenge factor coming in for Kansas City? Of course there is. But here's what I know. Chiefs defense can be had. You got a Bengals offense that's found its identity a little bit, more of a balanced attack, an O-line that is still not great, but is night and day from what it was back in 2021. Night and day. Even night and day from what it was earlier this season. So you go against Kansas City, though, this time. Chiefs are favored -2. I'm going to take the Cincinnati Bengals in a high-scoring game. I'm sorry, I must have said Kansas City there. Right there, that score is wrong. Excuse me. That says Kansas City 34-28. I meant to actually say, excuse me, Bengals 34-28. My bad, folks. That says Kansas City 34-28. Should say Bengals 34-28. I'll get that fixed by Sunday once I upload the graphics. But I have the Bengals winning this game 34-28 over the Kansas City Chiefs. Moving on to another divisional matchup between the Los Angeles Chargers and the Las Vegas Raiders. A rematch of a Week 18 matchup a year ago, which decided a playoff spot. And the game where I finally came to the realization that Brandon Staley is in over his head as a head coach because of his late game decision-making in overtime. Okay, Raiders are favored -1 in this game. Chargers are coming in. Listen, last second win on a very similar to Jacksonville one, right? Last second 2-point conversion to beat the Arizona Cardinals on the road. So a big, big win for the Chargers in terms of keeping pace in that AFC wildcard chase. But here's what I'm looking at for the LA Chargers, and a big, big flaw, a big hole that I believe the Raiders are going to expose. The Chargers are one of the worst defenses, run defenses in the NFL, giving up on average of 150 yards per game. That is not a good combination against Josh Jacobs, who is having the best season of his career. Against the Josh Jacobs, who a week ago ran for well over 200 yards and the game-winning touchdown to beat the Seattle Seahawks on the road. It's a 1-point spread that feels appropriate. excuse me, give me the Las Vegas Raiders to beat the Los Angeles Chargers 29-24. I said coming into the year, the Chargers would miss the playoffs. I hold very strongly to that. The Raiders will again put a big dent in LA's playoff chances. They split with the Chargers last year. I think they'll split with them this year. Raiders win 29-24. They seem to have found a little bit of an offensive identity. They will beat the Los Angeles Chargers 29-24 in this game. And the final game for Sunday, highly rated one without a question because it features America's team. The Indianapolis Colts and the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas in this game, big favorites, -10.5. Here's what I'm looking at for Dallas. Okay, again, another team coming off Thanksgiving. Obviously, the Cowboys always plan Thanksgiving. Extra time to prepare for an Indianapolis Colts team that is struggling big time. Offensively, they cannot move the ball down the field. Matt Ryan has become basically a statue in the pocket. They've just cannot move the ball down the field whatsoever. Struggling against the Steelers defense that's been up and down. So they're coming to Dallas. This is the proverbial trap game for the Cowboys. Really, the next 3 games, if you include this one, are trap games for the Cowboys. Colts, Texans, Jaguars. The 3, obviously, bottom feeders in the AFC South. With obviously Tennessee, they got the Tennessee Titans in Week 17 after their Christmas Eve matchup against Philly. But for Dallas, you've obviously run the ball exceptionally. Zeke played well last week against the Giants. Tony Pollard, to me, is the better running back. He's run the ball well. CeeDee Lamb had one of his best games, in my view, of the season, arguably his best game in total last week against the Giants, albeit against a beat-up secondary. The tight ends are into the act. Guys like Ferguson and Schultz, Hendershot. Dak Prescott's been on his game without a question ever since he has come back. The Dallas Cowboys are numero uno in scoring in the NFL at 33.6 points per game. Dak has been dealing, and the sky is also blue. Just breaking news there. I expect the Cowboys to get off to a little bit of a slow start. I think penalties are going to be a factor, but I do think they will win this game and cover the spread. A 2-score win, as big of a 2-score win as one can get over the Indianapolis Colts, 33-17 to get to 9-3. Try and keep pace with the Philadelphia Eagles. Again, if my upset of the week comes to fruition, then Dallas will officially control their destiny to win the NFC East because, of course, there's that big Christmas Eve matchup against Philadelphia in Jerry World. So there you go. Now, there's a lot of controversy with the Cowboys. Obviously, I talked about the Jerry situation yesterday. Again, extra day rest. I think Dallas will take care of business and beat the Colts 33-16. By the way, before I get to the comments, this is my Week 12 record last week. Very proud of it. 12-4. Okay, I've got about a 62% accuracy rate on my picks. That's pretty good. It's well over 500. And I hope to keep that thing, just that ticker, just keep moving up. That's what we're trying to do. Got a few comments here from Grady. Let's see. Okay, the first one. Does Tua doing well hurt Brian Flores? I like him, but man never made the playoffs. I do like him, though, in hopes he gets another shot. Not sure he handled the Giants thing the right way. The more time, here it is. More time goes by, no matter if an interview is a sham, you do it because you never know what can happen. But I do know that there's an absolute problem with diversity in the NFL coaching ranks. Yeah, I mean, there's no question about that last point you made. Does it hurt Brian Flores, though? It certainly does not help. I will tell you that. And I, like you, Grady, am a big Brian Flores fan. I think he did a good job. I think he deserves at least some credit in terms of changing the culture of Miami. I just think he was the wrong coach when it comes to developing Tua, because when you see what Mike McDaniel comes in and does with him, it's night and day. Now, am I still sold on Tua as a franchise quarterback? Again, call me in 16, 17 days after their games against the best defense in football, the San Francisco 49ers, after their game against a guy who some have argued, to me, outlandishly, is better than Tua, that Tua is better than in Justin Herbert. You got a Tua versus Herbert matchup in their second game after this one. And then the week after that, you got the Buffalo Bills in freezing cold Orchard Park. I'll make my decision on two of them. But to answer your original question, Grady, does it hurt Brian Flores? It hurts it more than it helps. Let's put it that way. It hurts in terms of you question now, can he work with young quarterbacks? That's the only thing. I do, though, hope he does get another shot because I do think he's a good head coach. No question about it. The production was there. Grady Edwards says, Josh Jacobs, that's my fantasy running back. Boy, listen, I hope you had Josh Jacobs in your fantasy lineup last week, Grady, because if you did, I'd be shocked if you lost. So I'd like to know how many fantasy points Josh Jacobs put up, because I don't play fantasy more often than not. I've dabbled in it here and there, but I don't know. It's just never really been my thing. Grady says we're taking the America's team name back when Brady comes back to the Pats next season. I actually did a segment on that, Grady, on the show yesterday. I don't see it happening. I just don't. Because I said on the show yesterday, when you talk about what Tom Brady left or why he left, that hasn't changed. Belichick is still going to have more power than him. And we see how that's turned out in terms of putting Matt Patricia at offensive coordinator and some of the free agent moves they've made the last couple of years. Not to mention the receiving corps is bad. Well, it was bad when Brady left and it hasn't got better. Matter of fact, it's probably gotten worse. I don't know. I don't see it. I think Brady probably goes to San Francisco next year. That feels like the better fit, especially if the Niners are healthy. They got these big expectations. They're the favorites to get out of the NFC and get back to the Super Bowl, which they got there obviously a few years ago. But if they come up short and it's because Jimmy G didn't play well, they're going to move on. Whether it be to Trey Lance or whether it be, to me in all likelihood, to Tom Brady. He's a Bay Area kid. He was a big Joe Montana fan growing up. He was in attendance when Dwight Clark made the catch to beat the Cowboys in 1982 in the conference title game. He's a Niners fan growing up, Bay Area kid. It only makes sense for him to go back to San Francisco. Not go back to San Francisco. Go to San Francisco to win one for his hometown team. To basically pull LeBron. Although Cleveland hadn't won anything. So that's different. At least the Niners have 5 Super Bowls. Yeah, 5 Super Bowls because they got 4 with Montana and 1 with Steve Young. They haven't won it. They have actually, this is an underrated story. The Niners have a longer championship drought than the Dallas Cowboys. Now, I'm not saying they're not better run than the Cowboys because they are, but I'm just throwing that out there. Grady says he was in my lineup talking about Josh Jacobs. Like I said, then I'd say you had to have won handily. I'd say you had to have won handily if you had Josh Jacobs. Good pick by you, Grady. Man. And I'd start him again because that Chargers run defense is really bad. Gives up 150 rush yards a game. That's why I'm picking the Raiders. I'd definitely keep Josh Jacobs in your lineup. No question. And then before we get out of here, I said that I would look at Cleveland's schedule because Grady was talking about that they go 2-4 the last bit of the season. So they got, including Sunday, at Houston, at Cincinnati, home against Baltimore, home against the Saints, at Washington, at Pittsburgh. Yeah, that feels like 2-4. I think they'll win Sunday against the Texans. I think they'll lose to Cincinnati and Baltimore. I think they'll beat the Saints because they're at home, so the weather's going to be a factor, whether it be Jameis or Andy Dalton. I'm going to trust Deshaun Watson more in that climate. But I think they lose to a really good Washington defense and running game, and they lose at Pittsburgh. Because there's a chance if Pittsburgh can maybe get hot a little bit here, maybe they make at least a respectable push for the playoffs. It is Mike Tomlin, never had a losing season. Okay, Mike Tomlin, if he wants to keep that streak alive he's been there since 2007, I think. 2007. Mike Tomlin's been the head coach of the Steelers since 2007. He's never had a losing season. If he wants to keep that streak alive, he can't lose 2 or more games. If that happens, the streak comes to an end. So that could be like a do or die game in terms of that streak for Mike Tomlin. Grady Edwards says Niners should have kept Alex Smith in hindsight. I don't know about that. Because for 2012 and 2013, Kaepernick was more productive than Alex Smith had been to that point. Obviously, they went through quarterback purgatory with once Kaepernick dipped off, then they had Brian Hoyer and they had who was that other guy? I know they had Nick Mullins there for a while. Who else do they have? CJ Beathard, I remember him. Blaine Gabbert. Then they got Jimmy G. So, I mean, if he said that I think they would have won the Super Bowl. I don't know. Because, again, the offense really got going in the second half. Remember that power outage in the Super Bowl against Baltimore? The Harbaugh Bowl, as they called it. John versus Jim. And, again, Ravens were up big. I think it was 28-6 was the score. But once the power outage happened, it felt like there must have been a power outage with the Ravens defense and offense, by the way, because San Francisco kept going up and down the field. Those Niners teams were really good. You know, Kaepernick and Anquan Bolden. Frank Gore was in his prime. Randy Moss was on that team. Randy Moss almost got a ring. Who was the tight end? Delaney Walker was there. Patrick Willis, Navarro Bowman. Those are some stacked Niners teams. I used to play with them a lot in Madden. They were really good. I don't think Alex Smith in the lineup, because I think there's a reason Alex Smith got benched to begin with. But that's just my opinion. We'll never know. We'll never know. But that was a great Super Bowl, though. I did enjoy it. That's actually the first Super Bowl I ever predicted. Super Bowl 47. And here we are now. I'm doing a podcast. Super Bowl 57 is in 2 months. There you go. All right, that is all the time we have for today's show. Appreciate everybody stopping by as always. Sorry for my cough for the second half of the show. Be sure to catch Carving It Up live on Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time on Facebook Live, YouTube, and on Twitter. Also, be sure to like, share, comment. Most importantly, take 2 seconds out of your day. Hit that big red subscribe button. Help the show. It helps the show tremendously. Also, hit the notification bell. Be notified, excuse me, anytime that we do a new live, a YouTube short, upload a new clip from the show. So hit the notification bell. Get notified anytime we upload anything. Also, be sure to subscribe to the Grid Network, GRYD. That is the Grid Network that I am a part of, along with Barry Grant Jr., who's a co-founder, along with Mike Guido of the All Even podcast. You got Patrick Brown, the Chaotic Sports podcast. He's got a really good episode on tap coming out this weekend, so be sure to check that out. The Rocket Fuel Jets podcast with Alfred Parsar Jr., Clutch Sports Talk with Ryan Flowers. What else we got? The Cowboys Can Fan podcast. My guys over there in Canada. So you got to check that stuff out on the Grid. Subscribe to the Grid Network, and also, of course, like, share, comment, and hit the notification bell over there. Also, that is where you can find my show on the Grid Network. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts on the Grid Network is where you, where you can listen to Carving It Up. So, a loaded weekend of sports, the World Cup, championship weekend in college football, the NFL, a loaded NFL schedule, by the way. I can't wait. It's going to be a fun sports weekend, and I can't wait to talk all about it on Monday. So, have a great weekend, everybody. Please continue to stay safe out there. God bless you all. Peace out. I don't feel that comfortable with Santa looking over my shoulder like that. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube. Be sure to click that big red subscribe button and go check out the other clips and full shows of Carving It Up Live. Have a blessed day.